We dive into the first part of our Ravens 2021 season review series next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we've returned here with another episode of Locked On Ravens. I am your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We returned here. It is a Monday, just a plain old regular Monday here in Baltimore, as the Ravens did not play a playoff game this weekend, as they are not in the playoffs. They finished the 2021 season 8-9. Everybody knows that already. The playoffs, though, were kind of up and down. A lot of blowouts. Not a ton of great games. I mean, you had the Bengals game with the Raiders be pretty entertaining, although the referees, oh my, just terrible refereeing in that game. And I mean, even the Dallas game had some referee controversy there at the end as well. So a couple close games, a lot of blowouts. Still have one game to go here today on Monday, as the NFL is doing that 3-day wild card round, the wild card weekend extravaganza. And the Ravens, unfortunately, not a part of it. So they don't have a chance to improve their team and get back to, I think, the standard that a lot of people have for them at this point. But here today, we are going to start off our 2021 season review series for the Ravens, with not really a ton to talk about for this team right now. We're not to free agency yet. We're not to the draft yet. That stuff will kind of creep up on us in the coming weeks, and we'll talk about it, of course, throughout the whole offseason. But for now, I do want to start this 3-part series. It's going to be 3 parts here. So today we're going to look at weeks 1 through 6 for the 2021 season. Next Monday, we'll look at 7 through 12. And then 2 Mondays from now, we'll go 13 through 18. And that'll be it. And then after that, we'll get into our regular scheduled mock draft Mondays for the entirety of the rest of the Mondays until the draft. And how mock draft Mondays work here on Locked On Ravens is every Sunday I post a mock draft Sunday mock draft that I do. I talk about it here on the show, talk about those prospects, how they can better the Ravens and what fits they are, and then talk about other prospects as well. So lots of content coming up this offseason for just Ravens football in general. The grind never stops here. And if you are following along with us here in video form on YouTube, you can see my face and my background. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. We're steadily growing. Our first goal here is 1,000 subscribers, and we'll be bringing you content 5 days a week in both video and audio form. If you are following along with us in audio form, be sure to follow the show, whether that's in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at CashRecord34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So with all that being said, let's dive right in here, starting off with the Ravens week 1 and week 2 matchups. We'll talk about the Raiders and the Chiefs, those 2 matchups here in this first segment. And so let's dive into it here. The Raiders game was, I'd call it a disappointing overtime loss. I mean, 33-27 in overtime was the final score here. And it was a game that many expected the Ravens to win. I mean, everybody knows about what the week 1 Ravens were before this game. I mean, it was they outscored their last 3 opponents 100 and something to 20 something or something in the teens. It was the Ravens in week 1 were just an absolute chainsaw. They were crushing opponents. And then all of a sudden, this Raiders team comes in and it was really the fourth quarter and overtime that dominated the Ravens, and that was really the story of the game. Baltimore actually was leading at halftime 14-10 and leading after 3 quarters 17-10, but all of a sudden the Raiders score 17 points in the fourth quarter, and then the final 6 in overtime on that play where Zay Jones is wide open and Marlon Humphrey just kind of gives up on the play, although Jones was pretty far ahead of him, and that's how it went. But I want to start here talking about just what really went on game plan wise for that game, because if people don't remember, the Ravens went through significant losses right before this game. They had Marcus Peters, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins all go down for the season within a couple days of each other. And this wasn't like it was 2 months before the regular season started, right? This was like 10 days or 7 days before this game. So they had to readjust a lot of their offense, readjust a lot of their defense, bring in guys like Latavius Murray and Devonta Freeman and Le'Veon Bell, and just really get contributions from guys who have been with the team for like a week. And that can be difficult always, and understandably so. But this was like one of the big Tyson Williams games. And I mean, the stat line wasn't exceptional. 9 carries for 65 yards and a score. But this was really like weeks 1 and 2 were the peak of Tyson Williams. And then after that, it was just all downhill. Lamar Jackson in this game finished 19 to 30, 235 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Also led the team in yards and carries on the ground, 12 for 86. Tyson Williams had that score, as I talked about. Latavius Murray also scored against his former team, but 10 for 28. That's 2.8 yards per carry. That was kind of a theme for him throughout the whole year. Was we'll get you 2 yards when you need to, but isn't really that big play guy who's going to get you a 15-yard run or a 20-yard run. The only time he did that was in week 18 against Pittsburgh, where, again, I do not know what he had for breakfast, but I want some of it, whatever it is. And he dominated that game, but in this game against Las Vegas, just didn't really have the juice, and he was just coming in. So a lot of people were expecting a kind of get used to the team type game. Marquis Brown had a carry for 5 yards. Trenton Cannon, remember that name? Trenton Cannon, 2 for 5. So, I mean, this team was kind of scrambling at this point, and I understand where, like, okay, this game kind of got out of control in the fourth quarter, but that was more of a defensive thing. I mean, Sammy Watkins, 4 for 96, Marquis Brown, 6 for 69 in a score, Tyson Williams, 3 for 29, Mark Andrews, 3 for 20, Patrick Ricard, 2 for 15, Devin Duvernay, 1 for 6. So this wasn't like a huge offensive stat line output for the Ravens, but on the defensive side of the ball, the Ravens give up 435 yards and 2 scores to Derek Carr. They held the Raiders to not a lot of rushing yards, 10 for 34 for Josh Jacobs. The longest run of the game for either team was Marcus Mariota, had a 31-yard scramble on his only carry, but other than that, it was fine. Darren Waller tore up this team, 10 for 105 and a score. But when looking at the overall team stats, I mean, the Ravens, where they struggled was on third down. They went 3 for 12 on third down. The Raiders went 7 to 15. That's a key discrepancy where I talked about it, especially early on in the season, and it was really a theme for the entire year, was the Ravens struggled on third down a lot, and their opponents didn't. The third down defense of the Ravens definitely got better over the course of the year, and they actually didn't finish that badly, but I mean, 491 total yards for the Raiders, 406 for the Ravens. Both teams averaged 6.1 yards per play. Another key difference here was that the Raiders won the time of possession battle only by about a minute and a half, so it wasn't that huge of a discrepancy there. But, yeah, it was tough. And the Raiders actually overcame twice as many penalties as the Ravens. The Raiders had 10. The Ravens had 5. So just disappointing overall. And, I mean, this game was really like the feeling game for me of, like, this game had the feeling to me in the fourth quarter and overtime of the Raiders, when they get the ball, they're just going to move the ball down the field and score. That's what it felt like. And that also had a key thing to do in the back half of the season when I felt the same way. And even in week 2, we'll talk about that in a minute here. But the overtime drive was, I mean, it was 2 plays for 27 yards there at the end of the fourth quarter. And then it was just like, unbelievable where the Raiders just got touchdown drive, field goal. They threw the interception open overtime, and then touchdown drive. So, yeah, not a lot the Ravens were doing to stop the Raiders, and the total yards story told the story there. But an opening week loss for the Ravens that not a lot of people wanted to see overall. And starting the season 0-1, not a death sentence, but not where the Ravens wanted to be. But then they come back in week 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs team in a game that many had them losing, including myself. Luckily, that was not the case. The Ravens pulling out a 36-35 victory in week 2, which was just a huge win for confidence overall. I mean, the Ravens had to play from behind for the majority of this game. They outscored the Chiefs 12-0 in the fourth quarter. I know a narrative surrounding the Ravens and Lamar Jackson is they can't come from behind. They can't play from behind. If the Ravens are down in the fourth quarter by multiple scores, they can't come back. Well, the Ravens, they did just that. And credit to them, especially after just a terrible start. The Chiefs ended up intercepting Lamar Jackson for a touchdown. Tyrann Mathieu had a 34-yard pick 6. But then you have just a touchdown responding drive where Devin Duvernay actually recovers a fumble and takes it into the end zone, which was kind of a wacky play. But Lamar Jackson finishes this game 18-26, 239 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. So, again, not a huge statistical game for him. But on the ground, it was 16 carries for 107 yards and 2 scores. Tyson Williams, 13 for 77. Latavius Murray, 9 for 36 and a score. Devonta Freeman, 2 for 29. Patrick Ricard, 1 for 2. Receiving, Marquis Brown, 6 for 113 and a score. Mark Andrews, 5 for 57. Sammy Watkins, 4 for 44. Tyson Williams, 2 for 16. Josh Oliver, 1 for 9. And the offense overall, I thought, played well. This was a game, putting up 36 points on the Kansas City defense back then was like, okay, you should be doing it, because the Kansas City defense was atrocious over the first half of the season, one of the worst units in the entire league. They stepped it up in the second half. The acquisition of Melvin Ingram, I think, really helped with that. But yeah, the Chiefs defense was just not good over the first part of the year. Patrick Mahomes finished 24 of 31 for 343, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. The Ravens holding the Chiefs to 3.4 yards per carry on the ground. Travis Kelce, 7 for 109. The Ravens held Tyreek Hill to 3 for 14 on 4 targets, which was actually very impressive. The Ravens devoted a lot of attention to him, but then Travis Kelce ends up, 2 very bad tight end performances back-to-back in weeks 1 and 2, one against Darren Waller, one against Travis Kelce. But in this game, when we look at the team stats, the Ravens actually went 6 for 11 on third down, so a lot better there. The Chiefs 1 for 6, so good third down defense. The Ravens and Chiefs, medium amount of penalties. Baltimore 8, Kansas City 5. But the Ravens held the ball for 35 minutes, 59 seconds. The Chiefs 24-01. And the Chiefs can score in a hurry. But the key plays, Odafe Oweh with the fumble on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, which got the ball back to the offense. Lamar Jackson on that 4th down conversion. Those were 2 big plays in a series of 2 minutes that won them this game. Not to mention the fact that they didn't give up. They could have easily, the Tyrann Mathieu pick 6, they could have been like, oh my God, this is a team that's beaten us 3 years in a row, and we're already off to such a bad start. But no, this team, common theme, never gave up, and it showed in this game against Kansas City in week 2. So the Ravens 1-1 at this point. We'll head into our first break. When we get back, we'll be talking about weeks 3 and 4 for the Ravens in 2021, reviewing them. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthy, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, and most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And there are so many flavors to choose from, so go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We return here. It's our second segment. Kevin Ostreicher, your host, still here with you. We just talked about the Ravens weeks 1 and 2 performances in the first part of our Ravens 2021 season review. Let's talk about weeks 3 and 4. And week 3 against these Detroit Lions, we're going to be talking about now. And look, a game that many thought the Ravens were just going to steamroll the Lions. And it just was not the case. The Ravens have had a problem over the last couple of seasons, dating back a decently long time, actually, of sometimes playing down to their competition a little bit. And this was definitely one of those times. The Lions had Jared Goff quarterbacking them, and this is a new head coach and a new scheme, and Dan Campbell, and they had Aaron Glenn as their defensive coordinator, and Anthony Lynn as their offensive coordinator, and the Ravens squeak out a 19-17 victory. And how did they squeak it out? Well, I have 2 words, and those words are Justin Tucker. Justin Tucker, well, there are other reasons, but Justin Tucker hits a 66-yard time-expiring, game-winning field goal, literally the longest field goal in NFL history. That's not an exaggeration. Doinks off the crossbar and in, and I thought it had doinked off the crossbar and went out into the field of play, and it was no good, but it goes in, it hits the net, and it's pandemonium. I mean, the whole stadium is shocked. The Ravens are running on the field celebrating. I mean, that was one of the best Ravens moments in franchise history. I know it's just a field goal, but no, it was the longest field goal in NFL history. It was a phenomenal kick. Justin Tucker cementing himself is, look, the greatest kicker of all time. Let's be real with it here. But I think that a lot of people were concerned coming out of this game. Yes, they were happy the Ravens got the win, but there were concerns that why did it take an NFL record field goal to beat a Lions team that was 0-2, that was already struggling? Well, there were a couple reasons. One, Marquis Brown was a key reason the Ravens were in the position that they were. The Ravens could have put the Lions away in the first half. They had so many opportunities to do so, but the issue was Marquis Brown dropped 3 surefire touchdowns. Or okay, I'll say 2 surefire touchdowns and 1 probable touchdown, because there was a chance that a Lions defender could have gotten to Brown on one of the touchdowns, but still, it was just 3 egregious drops that he honestly should have had, and he got in his own head. It was really just that, where the first drop happened, and then he's like, oh man, and then the next one happens, and he's really in his head, and then the third one happens, and it was just not great. So that was Marquis Brown's worst game of the season in week 3, and part of the reason why the Ravens could not put the Lions away was because it was just missed opportunity after missed opportunity. Now, Devin Duvernay had a spectacular catch in this one in the second quarter, by just in the back of the end zone, 19-yard pass by Lamar Jackson there. And then Justin Tucker hit a 50-yarder. I mean, Justin Tucker was this offense. He had 4 field goals, 39, 50, 32, and 66. And for what the Ravens were able to do in this game, part of it, most of it was Justin Tucker. But the 4th and 19 play from Lamar Jackson to Sammy Watkins was also a huge part of why the Ravens were able to be in the position they were. The Ravens looked dead to rights. They looked done on that 4th and 19 play, but Lamar Jackson makes magic happen with his arm. Throws it to Sammy Watkins, and Watkins is able to get a first down and put the Ravens in position to put Tucker in that position in a dome. Justin Tucker loves kicking in Detroit. He loves it. And I think that, those 2 plays combined at the end of that 4th quarter. Look, a win is a win, but it wasn't necessarily this all super impressive win where it's like a 30-point blowout. There were a lot of questions to take away. The Ravens' 3rd down efficiency was horrendous. They went 1 for 10 on 3rd down. Now, the Lions went 3 of 10, so it wasn't like it was much better, but still, just the Ravens had to be better than that, and they knew it. The Ravens also had 6 penalties. So, again, not terrible. 7 for the Lions there. They averaged 6.8 yards per play compared to Detroit's 4.8, but it was just, untimely missed tackles and untimely this, untimely that, and it was bad. But the Ravens get out of there with a win. That's the most important part. They moved to 2-1 and really set themselves up for a game in Denver where they knew they had to be better because, Denver was an interesting team, and we'll talk about that game now. 3-0 coming into this game. And the Ravens had controversy all season long, like literally throughout the whole year. And this was kind of like the start of it all, where the Ravens were going for the rushing record, most consecutive 100-yard games by a single team. And the Ravens, they wanted the record. And at the end of the game, they were in a position where they could have kneeled the ball, ran the clock out. But the Ravens, they wanted that record. They wanted it. And with the Ravens intercepting the Broncos, they get the ball back. And with 3 seconds left, instead of kneeling the ball, Lamar Jackson goes around to the left end, runs it for 5 yards, sits down. The game's over. They get the rushing record, or they tie the rushing record. They didn't actually end up breaking it, but they tie it. And Vic Fangio and some of these Denver players are just out of their mind, like hopping mad. And there's a video of like a sideline angle of Fangio, and he's like screaming and cursing, and some of the Broncos players are upset. And like it was just, if you don't want the Ravens to do that, stop them in the first place, right? Like don't let them get in that position, or go win the football game or something. Like, yeah, I get like the whole football etiquette thing of like old school stuff like that, but to me, it just wasn't a big deal. And like, even if I was covering the Broncos or rooting for the Broncos, I wouldn't have cared. Like, I would have been more upset that the Broncos had lost the game and put themselves in that situation anyway. It was a 23-7 win for the Ravens. It wasn't like this was a, 40-0 blowout and the Ravens rushed for 200 yards already and they get an extra 5. No, I mean, the Ravens wanted a record, and it's understandable why they would do it. I understand the arguments against it, but to me, it's a moot point. Lamar Jackson, 22 of 37, 316 and a score. Marquis Brown, 4 for 91 and a touchdown, redeeming himself for that game in Detroit. That was a key storyline for the Ravens in this one. How would Marquis Brown respond? And he responded. A spectacular touchdown catch, a long one, actually a 49-yard one, where he was able to make a great catch and get his feet down and everything. It was amazing for the Ravens. And their run game, not great. They averaged 3.4 yards per carry as a team. Latavius Murray, 18 for 59 and a score. Lamar Jackson, 7 for 28. Le'Veon Bell, 4 for 11. Devonta Freeman, 1 for 4. And then receiving-wise, James Prochet, 5 for 74. Mark Andrews, 5 for 67. Sammy Watkins, 4 for 49. Devin Duvernay, 3 for 31. And Patrick Ricard, 1 for 4. This was a game where Chris Board led the team in tackles, actually, which was kind of a funny stat. But the Ravens had 5 sacks in this game. They had 2 from Tyus Bowser, 1 by Justin Houston, 1 by Justin Matabike, 1 by Adafe Owe. And Owe was a player, just talking about Owe a little bit, he was a player that really came on over the first part of the season, tapered off over the mid part, and then came back on late, but did miss those final couple games with a foot injury, which was unfortunate. But for him, he was great. And Tyus Bowser was really just steadily consistent. He had the 2 sacks in this game, just steadily consistent overall, probably their most consistent defender all season long. The Ravens went 7 of 17 on 3rd down. The Broncos 3 for 14 on third down. Baltimore outgained the Broncos 406 to 254, and overall held the ball for longer, 33-07 to 26-53. The Broncos they had a very easy schedule, and them going to play, or I guess Baltimore going to play them, was all right, we're going to test out and see what you are. And the game went, I think, according to what a lot of people thought, where the Broncos kind of proved to be a little bit of a flukish team there, and the Ravens proved that, they were still playing to win at that point, and were still a very competitive and good football team. So the Ravens go into Mile High and beat the Denver Broncos there 23-7. We'll head into our final break, though. When we get back, we'll be talking about weeks 5 and 6 of the Ravens 2021 season. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the sports betting action this season in 2022. It's a new year, and there are new updated desktops and a mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. So take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. We returned here. It's our final segment of this Monday edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still hanging out with you here. And in this final segment, we will be diving into weeks 5 and 6 for this Ravens team, and two games here that, I think overall were pretty positive. I mean, with what Baltimore was expected to do after their injuries, and how down people were about this team, entering week 5, 3-1 was, I think, one of the better case scenarios. And they had a Monday night primetime game against the Indianapolis Colts. And oh boy, what a game this was. Lamar Jackson lit the world on fire, 37-43, 442 yards and 4 touchdowns. Also had 14 carries for 62 yards on the ground. But this was another one where the Ravens were playing from behind for a lot of the game. And a big block by Calais Campbell on a field goal that probably would have iced the game kept the Ravens in it. And a Colts team that went into halftime up 10-3 and ended the third quarter up 22-9. Ended up losing this game 31-25. They only scored 3 points in the fourth quarter. Baltimore scores 16. The game goes to overtime, and Baltimore scores the touchdown in overtime to give the game to the Ravens and move them to 4-1. Now, the Colts at this point were 1-3 entering the game, and that was surprising to a lot of people. They end up 1-4 at the end of this one. But Mark Andrews, this was kind of like the start of his dominance. Andrews was not, well, I'm not going to say he wasn't good, but he did not put up the production that people expected over the first 4 weeks of the year. He was getting honed in on, and look, as he should be, right? He's one of the best tight ends in the NFL and proved to be the best tight end in the league this year. But he did not put up the production that many expected out of him. And so week 5 was really the start to his season. 11 for 147 and 2 touchdowns. I predicted Andrews to have 147 yards and 2 scores in this game, or 150. I had him at 150 and two scores. Just 3 yards short. I was so close, but that was the start of Mark Andrews in his year. But it was crazy because it wasn't just Mark Andrews. He had 11 for 147 and 2 scores. Marquis Brown had 9 for 125 and 2 scores. I mean, just crazy, unbelievable stuff there. In a game where the Ravens, look, they had to abandon the run after, the third quarter. They were just down. They had to get back in the game. Lamar Jackson had 14 carries, Latavius Murray 6, Tyson Williams 4, Devonta Freeman 1. And, it proved to be effective. Lamar Jackson was slicing and dicing this defense up. And look, I get it. The Colts didn't have corners, right? But did the Ravens have corners at the end of the season? No. And people are saying, the injury excuse. Look, I get it. But still, you play who's out there, right? Just like the Ravens were playing who was out there. Just the other opponents the Ravens were playing everybody who was out there. And so it's whatever. But still, it was a very impressive game. Brandon Stevens led this team in tackles with 11. Anthony Averett had 7. Patrick Williams and Tyus Bowser both had 6. And it was crazy because Lamar Jackson actually lost a fumble in this game. Didn't throw an interception, but it was the fumbling issues early on for Lamar Jackson, right? People were talking about his fumbling issues. He had a couple against the Raiders, and it was kind of will Lamar Jackson stop fumbling the ball? And then towards the end of the year, or at least the end of his season, it was the interceptions, where it was, can Lamar Jackson stop turning the ball over and throwing interceptions and whatnot? And we'll talk about that over the rest of the series. But Lamar Jackson, the fumbling issues were a problem over the first part of the season, and he shaped it up. But this win, I think, was the most impressive of the Ravens season outside of the Chiefs game. I mean, the way that they were able to come back was very impressive. I'd stack up the two most impressive wins to the Colts and the Chiefs for the Ravens in 2021. The Colts went 5 for 10 on third down. The Ravens 3 for 8. The Colts actually had 513 total yards. The Ravens 523, over 1,000 total yards of offense by both teams in this one. So pretty impressive there. The Ravens holding the ball for slightly longer than the Colts at 33-51. The Colts 30-45. And, really the key part in this game, and this was right before Jonathan Taylor. Well, I guess it was right around Jonathan Taylor's breakout. He had that screen pass, and the Ravens and screen passes do not get along. They do not get along at all. They've had trouble defending them over the course of their franchise history, but yeah, Taylor on the ground was not super effective, just 15 or 53 in a score, but through the air, 3 for 116, including that long screen pass he took to the house. But doesn't matter. The Ravens got the win. They're 4-1 at this point, and they don't stop there. They go to 5-1 in week 6. We'll talk about that game here. Again, 4-1 for the Ravens, pretty ideal. And heading into a week 6 game with the Los Angeles Chargers, Justin Herbert entering this game had MVP conversation all around him. Literally MVP conversation. He finished this game. There was never there was never anybody else speaking about it. I mean, maybe that's an over exaggeration, but this was the game that I think absolutely ended the MVP talk for Justin Herbert. Herbert's a great young talent, one of the better young quarterbacks in the NFL. Don't get me wrong, but he struggled immensely against this Ravens defense. 22 of 39, 195 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception for Justin Herbert. Lamar Jackson actually had a worse game than Justin Herbert. He finished 19 of 27 for 167 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. But the Ravens, they won 34-6. They didn't need them. It was the ground game that really dominated in this one. Devonta Freeman, 9 for 53 in a score. Jackson, 8 for 51. Latavius Murray, 9 for 44. Le'Veon Bell, 8 for 18. Devin Duvernay, 1 for 11. And Tyler Huntley had 3 for 10. He came in the game for cleanup duty at the end there. Freeman, Murray, Bell each had a score. Each one of the Ravens' active running backs had a score. So good for all of them. But yeah, the Ravens didn't need the arm of Lamar Jackson a ton in this one. It was all on the run game and on the defense. The defense played dominant football. Anthony Averett and Josh Bynes had 6 tackles in this one. And this was the game where Josh Bynes started to get his playing time. And as we saw, the Ravens defense really stepped it up. They held the Chargers to 208 total yards, 3 for 12 on third down. They got a couple sacks on Justin Herbert as well, and also had a turnover where he was able to get the interception, or the Ravens were able to intercept Justin Herbert. The Ravens dominated time of possession in this one, 38-07 to 21-53, 6 of 11 on third down for Baltimore, 327 total yards, 2 penalties. I mean, this was the most dominant one of the Ravens season. Absolutely 100% the most dominant one of the Ravens season. And unfortunately, it came in week 6, but it was against a really good football team in the Los Angeles Chargers, who also entered this game at 4-1. It was 2 4-1 teams. The Ravens exited 5-1. The Chargers exited 4-2. Now, the Chargers had their whole thing towards the end of the season where they were collapsing. They couldn't win football games, and they turned out to be not as good of a team as many people expected. I thought they were going to be great this season, but it just was not meant to be for them. And I mean, seriously, for what the Ravens went through at the beginning of this, or even before the season started, to be 5-1 through the first 6 weeks was literally the best case scenario. Now, I had the team flip-flopping their loss, or I had them beating the Raiders and losing to the Chiefs, but it was still unbelievable. They were able to adjust, bring in these new guys, figure everything out. They were struggling with tackling. They were struggling with finishing sometimes, but they got the job done. They picked up wins in magical fashion. It was really a magical first 6 weeks, all things considered. They beat the Chiefs, who many labeled as their kryptonite, and it was true. They come back against the Colts. They dominate the Chargers. They have magic against Detroit. And in Denver, they dominate them as well. So through 6 weeks, the Ravens 5-1. There are still a couple more great wins to talk about as this series continues. We're done with the first part here. Talked about weeks 1 through 6. Next Monday, we'll talk about weeks 7 through 12. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But that's all I have for you today here on Locked On Ravens. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be continuing our talk about this Ravens team, of course. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.